Chapter 7. The Old Way. I started when the doors on the train slid open, and the car was flooded with sound. Men were shouting orders and taking stock of what was in the train car. I felt ragged from having stayed awake for the entire trip. The voices that were just outside the car started to fade as they moved on to the next train car. I took the chance to peek over the crate. No one was there. I leaped toward the door and poked my head outside. It was just before dusk. Sure enough, soldiers were going from car to verify what had been delivered, and were preparing to get everything unloaded. I hopped out of the train car and slowly walked alongside it, pretending that I belonged. I wasn't supposed to be here, but I wasn't a foreign spy. I was in Lude, after all. I was in my own country, dressed in the proper uniform of a Ludian soldier. As long as I didn't do anything foolish, I could move about without any issues. I walked as inconspicuously as possible and tried to get an idea of where I was. I could see buildings in the distance. Not particularly tall ones, but larger than those you would see in a village. It had been years since I visited one of Lude's cities, but I had a good memory. Any landmark would tell me where I was. I spun in a quick circle. It didn't take long for me to spot one. A tower with a bell that had been misshapen and discolored by a fire. Ages ago, the town had been engulfed by a mysterious fire, and almost everything had been reduced to ash. One of the few surviving artifacts was the town hall's bell. The raging fire had softened the metal until it resembled an ugly teardrop. Its shiny bronze stained a smoky red. In the right light, it looked like a heavy drop of blood suspended in the tower window, ready to splash down at any moment. People whispered that the bell represented all of the lives lost in the fire. It hung as a grim reminder in the middle of the city. I didn't know why they kept the ugly beast on display for everyone to see, but now I was grateful for it. It told me where I was. It told me I was in the closest major city to my home in the hills. I was in Tracul. Tracul was a mid-sized city. Nothing compared to the capital city, Gled. I walked to the front gate that separated the strictly regimented life of the military from that of the ordinary citizenry. The checkpoint was guarded by a single person. He had the less than exciting job of checking people's papers as they entered and exited the garrison. Yet another critical point in my journey home. If I were going to get caught anywhere, it would be here. I headed toward the gate to make an attempt to leave. The guard coughed.
It's just about lights out. What kind of important errand do you need to run?
He wheezed. The cherry of a lit cigarette dangled from his lips. I guess it was too much to ask just to be allowed to walk out the front gate. Luckily, I knew how to fake my way through this. I just had to press the right series of buttons.
The old man put me on another sauce run for him. You know how it goes, right?
I huffed, deepening my voice as best I could. Keeping things vague was the best way to work through these situations. Every military site had a grumpy, old officer, and sauce could mean anything from alcohol, food, or actual sauce. People were strange, and I could use that to my advantage. The guard raised an eyebrow.
You got the papers for this little trip?
He grumbled. Here I go.
The chief just yelled at me to get it for him. If I have to go back there and ask for paperwork, do you know what he'll do to me?
I challenged.
You know the rules.
The guard insisted.
Look.
I checked his ID badge for his name.
Tucker. I don't want to have to tell him the reason I wasn't back fast enough with what he asked for. It'll be bad for us both. I'll be back in a flash,
I assured him. The guard, Tucker, sighed. He didn't want to be yelled at. His job was boring, but it was supposed to be easy. He wanted to avoid anything that would change that.
All right. Hurry back and don't cause any trouble.
He groaned as he hit the buzzer to unlock the gate.
You don't have to worry about me,
I assured him as I rushed out the gate.
No one will even know I was gone.
I was off of military soil and back in the civilian realm. It was my first time back in the world in a long time. I hope I remember how to act, I thought. I ducked off of the main street and into a side alley. I stripped off my military jacket and placed it on the top of a trash can. With just a black undershirt, camouflage pants, and heavy boots, I looked less like a runaway soldier and more like a rebellious young woman trying to make a trendy fashion statement. I allowed myself one last longing glance at the uniform jacket. The uniform had been my outer shell for the previous 2 years. Would I still be myself without it? I wondered. I opened the trash can's lid, pushed the jacket unceremoniously inside, and buried it underneath the garbage. Walking back out into the main road, I felt a freedom I hadn't in a long time, but it was soon replaced by worry and sadness. What about my brother? Would I ever find out what really happened to him? A farm truck puttered down the road. I stuck out my hand to flag him down.
Are you going anywhere near that mountain?
I asked, pointing to the green giant in the distance.
Aye, I'm going pretty close. You need a ride, young lady?
He said kindly. I nodded.
As close as you're going is fine with me,
I replied. I started to pull on the door handle, but it didn't budge.
You can ride in the back. There's plenty of room with the sheep,
he said, tapping his knuckles on the window behind him. Fair enough, I thought. He didn't know me, and didn't want to take the risk of letting me in the car with him. For all he knew, I was an axe-wielding maniac. I climbed into the back of the truck where a half-dozen scared sheep bleated in protest, not appreciating the sudden visitor. The smell of damp hay and livestock was refreshing. It filled my mind with thoughts of a simple life.
Hush, hush,
I soothed, as I sat myself on top of a dirty tarp that was in a clump in the corner. The truck coughed black smoke and lurched down the road and out of the city. The stone and brick gave way to wood and earth. Thick, untouched forest walled in the modest roadway the truck traveled down. In the trees, I felt safe. I hadn't slept for some time now. I fought to keep my eyelids from closing and to stay alert. I needed to stay awake to watch out for myself and to watch for the way home. But that wasn't the only reason. If I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Several hours passed, and the sheep finally decided that I wasn't a threat. A few of the younger animals snuggled up close to my side and leaned hard into me as I stroked their matted wool. Petting them helped keep me awake. I kept my eyes on the road and, before long, I spotted the remnants of an unmaintained pathway that had been overtaken by crawling plants and carpeted by dead leaves. I banged my hand on the side of the truck to signal the driver to stop. The truck slowed and pulled off to the side of the road. I hopped out and circled around to thank the driver. The man tipped his hat.
You take care of yourself, girl,
he drawled before driving off down the road in a cloud of smoke. I headed down the path, wading through the underbrush and hopping over fallen limbs. I hiked for about a mile until I saw it, my old home. It was a simple cabin in the forest, but it was mine. The windows were dirty but intact. Some vining plants had done their best to take over the structure, but luckily it didn't look like anyone had tried to break in. I approached it slowly, letting the memories wash over me. There was the rock we used as a sanctuary during a game of tag. There was the circle of trees we pretended was a castle. I walked down the driveway, approaching a mass covered by a tattered tarp. I flung it off, sending a cloud of dust into the air and revealing an old pickup truck. The truck was a faded blue and had more than a few scrapes and dents. This was the truck my brother used to teach me to drive. I couldn't help but smile as I gave the old beast a few loving pats. I went around the back to retrieve the key to the house. If it weren't in its hiding spot, I'd have to break a window to get inside. I found the stump of an old-growth tree that had been felled in a storm when I was a little girl. A rot in the trunk of the tree had weakened it, so that a heavy wind brought it crashing down in the middle of the night. After the tree had fallen, the deep gash inside the tree was clear to see. It was like an infected wound that had festered unseen. It was only a matter of time before the creeping disease sucked the life out of the tree. I ran my hand over the dry, cracked stump. The old-growth wood wouldn't entirely surrender to the elements and melt away into compost. Before it had fallen, My brother and I used to spend countless hours climbing this tree. It was almost like a part of the family. I stuck my hand in the hole in the tree stump and wiggled my fingers, searching. I felt something cool to the touch and not made of wood. I pinched it between my fingers and slowly removed my hand, careful not to drop my prize. I opened my hand, revealing a worn metal key. Bingo, I thought. Using the key, I let myself into the cabin. All of the furniture was still covered in white sheets to keep the dust away. Everything looked just as I had left it 2 years ago when I had thrown my old life away and joined the military to find out what really happened to my brother. I had escaped. No one found out that I was a woman impersonating a man. But I hadn't found out much of anything about what had really happened to my brother. I wasn't going to give up, but I didn't know what to do next. For now, at least, I was home. But for how long, I wondered.